Hi Bother Brigade, here's what's bothering me today. This video has actually been made in collaboration with Ponderful, and you should definitely check out her channel. She does a lot of really great video essays, especially relating to autism. All in all, great stuff, very good person, go support her channel. Why this is happening is because we both kind of talked about travel and had some similar feelings and observations about a lot of travel as it currently exists as an industry today. So she already talks a bit about her experiences over on her channel and in her video, where she's done a lot of backpacking and even led the van life. So that's mostly her focus and observation. On my end, well, I guess this means I have to tell people a little bit about myself. I have been a tour guide in the past, actually, and I've also lived overseas. Now, for me, what I qualify as living overseas is somewhere where I stay for, at minimum, like 1 month, and I actually have to live there, not as in just staying with a host family or a friend and I'm just kind of couch surfing. I mean, I have a job, whether it's a contract or not, and I am there specifically for a job, and that's kind of what I'm doing with only a little bit of stuff on the sides, and I have to get in very close and comfortable with the local culture. And so because of this, I say that I've lived in both Spain and India. In Spain, I was an English teacher. First time I count that as like a working abroad, like a student thing, because I was just a teaching assistant. The second time I went to Spain, that was definitely like, okay, I'm here to do a full job. Here's my curriculum. I now have to implement it and write a bunch of lesson plans, do all the work. I barely did any real traveling outside of a couple long weekends. Like, that was it. I very much lived in Spain. You know, I had to get a place, pay rent for it, yada, yada, yada. And the job in India was for a family member. And that's basically all I'm going to say on that, because obviously they haven't consented to be a part of this video. And in terms of travel, I've been to a great many places, not just Spain or India now, but I've also been to Cuba. I've technically been to Mexico, but that's when I was an infant, so that doesn't really count in my opinion. I've also been to the Netherlands, to Belgium, to France, Denmark, and like a day trip to Sweden because we were in Denmark. And the United States. Sorry, how could I forget? Right next door. So that's the core group of countries that I have spent time in, and I would love to visit so many more, like Iceland, Japan. I would like to properly visit Mexico. I'd like to visit Brazil. I would love to visit Egypt and see the Great Pyramids. Like, there's the list, honestly, goes on and on. It's kind of a problem, right? So I'm coming at this from a multitude of factors. One, as a tourist, and as Ponderful points out in her video, she does make a distinction between backpackers and tourists. I'm definitely a tourist, or that's what I've mostly done, is be a tourist, go sightseeing. I want to just immerse myself in what locals have to offer. So that's where I'm going to come into this. But at the same time, I've also been a tour guide. So I have this, I shouldn't say unique, but definitely more of an informed and a more complete picture about both sides of being a tourist. Now, some people refer to tourism as a form of neo-colonialism, and there is definitely an argument to be made for that in terms of, oh, a lot of the places that you go to are big resorts where the vast majority of the money doesn't go to local communities, but to the wealthy investors, many of whom are from outside of the country, and really only a few from inside the country, and the highest echelons of power get access to that. And it leads to corruption because, of course, Westerners want to go to these places and relax, and it leads to corruption and abuse and assault and all kinds of terrible things. So sure, we tourists might go there for only a week or a few weeks, maybe a month at the longest, but to the local people, that is something that is always there. It is ever present. This foreign population occupying a part of your land that extracts, you know, purpose and wealth from it, but you don't see any of that. Instead, a very select few in your country, perhaps even in theirs, sees that wealth. So there is an argument to be made there. Also, let's just address the elephant in the room. A great many Westerners, the vast majority of whom are white, when traveling do kind of tend to be a little nervous around people who aren't like them, or like at least Western in some capacity, right? Because you always want that kind of familiarity. If you're traveling overseas, oh, thank God, an Australian. Oh, thank God, a Brit. Because like someone who speaks my language and maybe has seen and done some of this stuff, and I can get the information from them. Yay! And there isn't anything inherently wrong with that, but let's just be clear about what it is, right? And a great many of these different palaces that pass for resorts are clearly meant for a certain demographic of people who have money to spend and they want to go, and they don't really want to leave the resort outside of maybe a single excursion or something. They don't really want to mingle and understand the locals except for some kind of human people zoo that makes it look like, oh wow, look, they're all riding around in tuk-tuks, and here's a snake charmer. Isn't this so fascinating? This is totally real life, right? Well, we're gonna get to that. Another problem with a great many resorts is the fact that so many of them are owned by Westerners, run by Westerners, specifically for Westerners. There's numerous ayahuasca retreats throughout Central and Southern America, which is run by like hippy-dippy people from the West who are there to provide an authentic local indigenous experience under their astutely guiding hand, which is a little weird if I'm being honest. Numerous yoga retreats and ashrams in India are run by Westerners, and if not, then they definitely cater to Westerners. It strikes me as very odd that there are some people, especially when they try and seek enlightenment, they want to go and visit like Buddhist monasteries and temples, whether it's in India or, you know, Nepal or Bhutan. And it's this whole prim and pampered experience that you don't see the backside of that results in a ton of local exploitation. This happens for people climbing Mount Everest. This happens for people who claim to want to find themselves spiritually, and they go to some really fancy, several $100s USD, by the way, a night retreat in the beautiful mountains somewhere in Himachal Pradesh or Srinagar. Like, it's so ridiculous. And not only is it ridiculous, but it is completely divorced from the actual lived experience of people in those cities. Think about wherever you've gone as a tourist, right? And what have you done? Have you really only gone on like a sightseeing day trip or a bus tour and then kind of seen maybe a few museums and that's about it? And then a lot of people have the audacity after that. And again, not saying that there's anything wrong with traveling and tourism. Like, again, I enjoy being a tourist. But there's something really weird when people only go and see and do a little bit of stuff and then they say that they've done a place. Like, have you done India yet? Have you done Costa Rica? And again, as someone who has actually spent actual time living in other places overseas, I still can't say that I've done those places because they are massive and so full of people and distance and diversity, and it's honestly an incredible thing, and I'm very thankful for the privilege that I've had to have been able to go to these varieties of places and have even just a glimpse of what the local life is like, whether I'm only there for a week or in some cases years. I've literally spent 2 years of my life in Spain, one which I consider as like properly living there rather than just being a very extended, you know, stay over the course of a school year, and I still can't say that I've done Spain because there's so much that I heard about that I hadn't been able to see or experience. And that's where I want to pivot to next, about the experience of tourism. Why do we go on tours anyway, right? For lots of people, it's just to relax. Lots of Canadians here love to go to some tropical island down in the Caribbean or to the coast of Mexico and just relax, get drunk, and have some fun for a week or two. And I understand that, and in a way that's fine. But then on the other end of that, as I pointed out recently, resorts in Mexico are now being overwhelmed by COVID cases being brought by a variety of travelers and tourists. That is something that people bring and leave in Mexico, and it negatively impacts the locals who don't see as much of the wealth that is brought in and generated in these places. That goes to, of course, corrupt officials and business owners at the top. And so when we do other tours, even if they're more environmentally conscious tours where they ensure that it's going to a local experience, and that's something that the tour guide company that I used to work for had definitely did, and they encouraged us to, when we were doing our tours, to keep that in mind. So sure, there are people doing that, but think about those that aren't doing that. Are they actually showing support for real local business and industry? And then if you're someone like me who does like to go somewhere and actually go wandering around, experience the city, try and find stuff, struggle through the language barrier, try local foods and see what's going on just in the casual cityscape, check out museums. Okay, cool. Why do we do that? We want to, you know, culturally enrich ourselves. There's something that we were told is very interesting here and we wanted to see it for ourselves because it sounded interesting to us. But what is the impact on the local population in that regard? How many locals basically have to live or share their city eternally with tourists. And so this brings us back again to me being a tour guide. While in Spain, and when friends and family came to visit me from either other corners of Spain or from around the world, I showed them not only the local town that I was living in, but also the parts of Barcelona that I knew. Oh, and also Madrid, when I was actually living in Spain. I went to Madrid a few times, and then friends came and visited me, and I showed them around there as well. And then there was also a time where, thanks to, again, immense privilege that I will recognize here for a hot second, I've been to Paris not once, not twice, but 3 times, which is actually 2 times more than I even expected. But the second time there is interesting because that's when I was in Spain the first time, and a friend was making his way through Europe, and that's where he was going to be on his journey when I had a week off. It was spring break for me. So I decided to take spring break in Paris and join up with this old friend of mine. And so with that being the second time in Paris, and the previous time I had been shown around the local area by my lovely and gracious acquaintance host, that gave me a bit of an insight of, oh yeah, here, I know some good stuff. I even took him out for shawarma, because guess what? Shawarma is very popular in many corners of Paris. So this is my background as an unofficial tour guide, never mind in my capacity later on as an official tour guide for a tour company here in Canada. And so between all these different impromptu tours I gave to friends, the common thread among all of them was, I really appreciate this because it's not like everything else I've seen and done, which is quite telling. Showing them, you know, some of the local cultures and cuisine, and oh yeah, here's what they do here in terms of like how you eat your tapas. That's okay, this is what you do. And it always felt supremely weird to me because I still recognize throughout all of those instances that I was the outsider. I was just parroting back whatever I had taken in over my time, whether it was brief or long, in whatever place I was in. That still always was there under the surface, unsettling me a little bit. But again, there's my friends having a great time. They're saying, you know, this is fantastic. I love this. This really improved the trip immensely because it wasn't just the stock standard stuff that was happening. And so that's a good thing. But I guess this brings us to what my friend who came to visit me, or we rather met in Paris, had to say. And I think it really hits the nail on the head. I have hated doing all the touristy shit, but doing this stuff with you has been some of the best time in my life. My friend, and rightly so, and I completely understand as someone who's already been to Paris and done this, trying to be a tourist in Paris is exhausting, precisely because of the other tourists. So a while ago, I wrote an article about Paris, and I will link it down below, and we are going to get to talking about some of the gist of it in a bit. But I want to focus more on what my friend said that really struck a chord with me, and I think should begin to resonate with some people. The whole aspect of tourism in Paris is that people come to be in Paris, but they don't come to actually see Paris. Here's what I mean. As my friend pointed out, when he tried to do the touristy stuff, right? Like, oh, okay, I gotta go to the Eiffel Tower, Arc de Triomphe, I gotta go to the Louvre, I got to go see Versailles, and it's just like money, 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 lines, lines, lines. It's incredibly expensive. Lots of other people are just there, and it's just overwhelming crowds, and there's people trying to make a quick buck off of everything there. It is not actually a fun time. If you've actually gone to Montmartre, you see that it is not the magical neighborhood of artisans as imagined in the Belle Époque of France. It is a sprawling morass of tourists and signs in English, and the only shops are sex shops and souvenir shops, and people are just stuck there shoulder to shoulder with a million other people. It sucks unless you go and find one of the few quiet corners of Montmartre off of the beaten track, which we did, and it was fun and it was great. But we weren't going to get that from a tour company. We weren't going to get that from the tour guide and handy pamphlets that they have at every airport and train station. And again, I identify as a tourist, and I'm very much guilty of this. The first time I went to Paris, it was all about, oh yeah, look, here's the Arc de Triomphe, and here's the Eiffel Tower. Notice how pissed off I look here. The Louvre was amazing. I absolutely loved it. But all of that was still just so exhausting trying to do all that. But can you blame me? For all I knew at the time, that was going to be my only time in Paris. So I had to make the most of the 72 hours I had. And that brings us to the point that I was making about how people come to be in Paris and share that with people like, look, see, I'm in the place. Look at me. I'm in the place, guys. I did it. We don't come to actually see Paris. And again, when I started to actually see it, it was amazing. It was incredible. I had some amazing food, whether it was homemade or not. And so this is where I want to briefly talk about the article that I mentioned that I wrote. So again, that article is about myths and misconceptions about the people of Paris. Because think about it, right? When I talk about Paris and the local Parisians, you're probably immediately in your mind, whether it's accurate or not, you're thinking about snooty, fashionable, rude people, right? Now again, caveat, I do speak French, but in my opinion, it's not that great. Maybe I just hold myself to a really high standard, but from the moment I got on the plane in Montreal to then fly over to Paris and then spend the rest of my trip in France, I spoke next to zero English. There was only one stressed and overworked waiter who spoke to me in English. Everyone else, from people on the plane to people on the many trains to people on the bus, on the metro, my gracious host, people when I was asking questions in French at the various museums, everything that I did was en français. And they even encouraged me. And because I said, hey, you know, I want to know about some of these things in Paris, like where's a good place like to get a shawarma? What's a good like fun bar that has like a nice punk show going on? And the Parisians were like, okay, you actually care. That's the difference, right? Is when you have all this stuff and there's tourists everywhere that are just clogging up your streets and your metro and being insensitive and rude about your food and cuisine, you obviously become very rude and tired and hateful of that. But when you meet someone like me and my friend and other people that I brought there to be like, wait, you actually want to see like cool stuff here? All right, cool, yeah. Bienvenue à Paris. Some of the highlights for me, for example, is a lovely neighborhood, and to prevent it from being absolutely overrun with my fellow tourists, I'm not going to say which neighborhood it is in Paris, but it had just all the diversity that I'm looking for, right? We're talking like West African food markets, we got Kurdish sandwich shops, an Indian bistro, a French bar, classic French bakery. Then you also had like a Vietnamese place. So it was really mixed. There was fascinating street art as well. I absolutely loved it. And one of the places we went to in this area, it was a bar, and we were going out one night and we found this bar that served, you know, classic French beers and some wine, like some imports as well. It was great because at one point we sat down at a table. It was the last table available, and we were speaking with an Argentine and his girlfriend who was Catalan from Spain. I was like, hey, I just came from Catalonia. And so that was really fun. So as you know, we're having our drinks and we're bonding over our travel experiences and our experiences in Paris and stuff. This waiter comes by with food. And we thought, me and my friend, that is, we thought, oh, okay, well, they must have ordered something. That's fine. We're not really hungry. And then they serve 2 plates to us as well. And we're freaking out thinking, oh, no. Sorry, we didn't order anything. This was all in French, by the way. I'm just saying this part in English because I'm telling the story, because what happens next was amazing. They told us, oh, no, this is on the house. Yeah, this fantastic little bar in a quaint little corner of Paris offered, and I swear to God, I'm not making this up, this was the free snack that was provided for people to prevent them from becoming too drunk and having an empty stomach. It was a bed of couscous with roast vegetables with a perfectly cooked chicken thigh on top. I cannot emphasize enough how that was a free snack at a bar in Paris. Another thing I did that I absolutely loved was I heard from someone that there was actually a really fascinating exhibit about light and color going on at a random gallery that was not too far from the French Opera House. Now, the French Opera House is a big thing that people love to go and see. And so sure enough, when I got there, sea of tourists, everyone's taking pictures of that and taking selfies. And I just kind of walk around a few corners, find the hole in the wall gallery, go up the stairs, and it was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had in a gallery. Each exhibit was beautiful and stirred emotions in me, which is exactly what art is meant to do. And again, I got that at the Louvre, but I also got this here. And the one being here was in a place that I never would have known had it not been for a local basically telling me, oh, hey, this is here. Thank you for actually showing an interest in our city. So that was Paris, but also I want to talk about how this affects Barcelona for a hot second, because I've been there too. And again, typical me being problematic, I've contributed to that. Barcelona is a beautiful and amazing city full of fantastic sights, amazing food, and some incredibly friendly and helpful people. But it is also a city that is grappling with the effect that tourism has had on it. It has very much become a political issue in Barcelona and in Spain in general, especially along the Mediterranean coast, about what to do with tourists, because they drive up the local prices for everything. And so the local people of Barcelona are in many ways becoming displaced by something that is supposedly for their benefit, but they don't often see it that way. What little money and infrastructure Spain has is increasingly devoted to tourism, because that's one of the few sectors of the Spanish economy that is doing well. And while that's understandable, it definitely shows a disconnect between the lived reality of people on the ground and just the actual reality of your average Spaniard. Or in this case, Catalan. We're not going to get much into that because that's a subject for a whole other time. But one of the things that strikes it most is how much of the city of Barcelona is catered to the tourist experience. And so again, my time there and with locals and local friends meant that I knew about some places and things that other friends didn't. So when they said, oh, hey, we have like a layover in Barcelona, or we're going to Barcelona for a week, what should we do? Where should we go? I said, okay, so here's where you go for the best paella. Here's where you go for just best seafood in general. This place is also a really good little tapas bar. This is a more traditional tapas bar, but still really good and really fun. Here's a dope art gallery you need to see. Here's a cool historic site. Also do like these handful of touristy things, because those are like the must do if you're there. And they went, they did it, and they said, oh my God, that was amazing. And we didn't even know about like half of that stuff, and it wasn't in the tour guide. Thank you so much. Which means now they've probably told their friends, and they're going to tell their friends. And then more tourists are going to come to these areas and touristify it. It's gotten to the point that vast areas of Barcelona are not even frequented by local Barcelonans themselves. And the same unfortunately goes for a lot of communities living on the coast of Spain. One such instance for me that was very personal was we took a day trip down to the sea because I said, oh, you know, I hadn't seen the Mediterranean. Even though it was in the winter, I wanted to see it and at least dip my feet in the Mediterranean Ocean, which I did. It was surprisingly cold, but yeah. And so we went to two places, Salou and Cambrils. Salou is the definition of a tourist town, and it was kind of jarring when I heard the local host family at the time tell me how, oh yeah, it's common that a couple tourists die every year in Salou because they do like this balcony jumping thing. Inevitably, a few people are too drunk and they underestimate the distance, and then they fall to their deaths. I was like, what? And like, yeah, it happens. Okay. And driving through Salou, like, it's still pretty, right? Like, it's the Mediterranean, you got some, you know, bright colors, there's palm trees, nice, you know, vistas and promenades. It's like, okay, not too bad. But it was weird because all the signs were in English, you know, come here for your full English breakfast, or we got, you know, a kind of southern fried chicken over here, or signs in German and Russian saying, we speak German, or we speak Russian. And we also have access to your banks here. Look, come on, we're making it convenient for you people from colder areas of Europe. Come on down, this ain't our city anymore. And then right next door in Cambrils, it was a completely different story. It was a much more quaint vibe, definitely felt like a small harbor town. It was actually full of life because Salou was for tourists, Cambrils was for people. We had a lovely Catalan lunch there, and there were just streets alive with actual proper local businesses and artists and musicians. It was the real Catalonia, not Salou, which was clearly a city made for tourists. And that's the reality in Spain, and that's the reality in many parts of India, like I mentioned, with the ashrams and many places and ayahuasca retreats run by Westerners throughout Central and Southern America. Again, Ponderful makes some great points over in her video about specifically Thailand. But the counterside to this is if I tell people, and perhaps again, this is already going to happen with this, people are going to see this and see and hear of some of these stories and places and think, ooh, now I want to see those because I want to go off the beaten track, right? I'm not a regular, typical tourist, right? But we're still tourists. I'm still a person who has gone to another place and basically just been around for a while, in many cases ignorant about a great many things, and then I leave and just a handful of people get my money. The vast majority of my money goes to an airline company, and in many cases someone providing the accommodations. Both of those tend to not be run by the local people. So am I saying tourism bad? No, of course not. I like to travel, and again, as Ponderful makes the distinction between backpackers and tourists, she's been more of a backpacker. I've definitely been more of a tourist. I intend to still do tourism in the future, and I intend to hopefully be more of a tour guide again when the pandemic is actually over. Because traveling isn't bad, right? Case in point, in Paris, when I said, you know, I'm actually interested, I want to know where to go for this stuff. Like, where do Parisian millennials go for brunch to cure a wicked hangover from a rock or a metal show the night before? That's a more real lived experience to young Parisians than say, oh yeah, I want brunch on the Seine. Like, it's different, right? And people obviously want to share these experiences with outsiders, right? Hey, please come in here. I want to show you my food. I want to show you my neighborhood and like some aspects of my culture. Here's a great gallery or like beautiful architecture. People do like to show off whatever their local communities have to offer, whether that's nature, history, architecture, food, some kind of cultural aspect, jewelry, artisanry. Like there is stuff that people rightly want to share with other people and then hopefully benefit from that in some way for themselves and also their community. This is why there are, you know, small rural villages in many corners of India, Thailand, where you can go there purely for the kind of rural and off the beaten track experience, and those people have consented to that because in some way they do benefit from it. But at the same time, there's many other communities that say, no, we don't want a part of that. And it does have to do with the fact that we are still making impositions, whether we realize it or not, in other people's countries and homes. I'm not entirely sure what the solution is here, but it's definitely not more of the same and more of like Airbnbs and stuff. That's not going to be something that solves, you know, the housing crisis and actually get people to be culturally literate when doing traveling overseas, right? That's not how this is going to go down. But if we can maybe do a bit more research and effort on our ends and make connections with people overseas so that when we do go see them, we get a unique, local and engaging view while being sensitive to local needs and actually helping local communities rather than putting more money in the pockets of capitalists who own the travel and tourism industry. Maybe if we do that, not only will we have more interesting, fascinating, and genuine travel experiences, but the people whose homes and lives and cities and nations we are disturbing by our presence can actually feel a little more confident and at ease about our presence, because that would be a more equitable relationship. But that's a long way coming, and unfortunately, we're not quite there yet, even though we've had decades to work on this. And that's what's bothering me today.